So, how do you use attributes in School Tool? Well, up until this year, as those who were at today's staff meeting heard, I didn't use them prior to being taught about being able to mathematically calculate grades, even though you're only using an attribute. If I go into my one section of U.S. history, you'll have to forgive. I am going to blur out some information so that you don't have students' private information linked directly to their name, but you can see lots of grades put in here. You can also see these little blue tickers. This is what I did along the way, adding comments to assignments. And while I still add comments a little bit, you also see this. Absent. A student was absent the day of a test. Please see me ASAP for makeup is also a note that I added. But this checkbox here of absent, or if they were present instead of absent, I could mark it as missing. Now, how do you add those attributes to your actual classroom? Well, if you go to this drop down here, and instead of Gradebook Editor, you go to your Gradebook Setup, which you're likely going to do at the beginning of the year anyway. On the upper part here, you can see tabs. There are attributes, and you can add attributes. I have added absent and missing. Now, I would use this here, over here on the right, the green plus sign to add something new, but I'll show you by just clicking Edit on one of mine. So missing, M, and there's a drop down. Do you want it to be no credit? Do you want it to be exempt? Do you want a point adjustment? So if it's late, do you want it to be minus 10%? Or actually point adjustment, percent adjustment. So depending on what method of grading, whether you use percent system categories or total points, this gradebook I'm using happens to be total points. I do have other classes that use categories. I have everything, my two attributes, missing and absent, assigning no credit. So even though, and if I go back to my home screen and back into the same exact gradebook, and you saw the student who was missing a test because of their absence, this is factoring into their grade. This student is actually quite a good student. You wouldn't think so because it's reading 76 right now. If I removed this attribute and there's no grade being calculated, that student's grade jumps up to a 95. But when I say they were absent and it drops their grade to a 76, that motivates them to want to get that test in. You can do the same for any homework assignment. I have many you see here as zeros. That is because as of taking a test, the kids cannot make up the relevant material that goes to that test. And I'm still implementing the attributes as well. So I still make the mistake of putting it a zero in a comment sometimes. But I do think that, especially as of a fresh start next year, there will be no confusion if I simply start using these attributes across the board. So as Jen Lockwood pointed out, you can see Jen, myself, somebody else from the PLC that discussed this attribute issue, and anybody would be happy to show you these things. I felt rather foolish actually when I wasn't using them, and people in my PLC pointed out you really should be using them. So I can't encourage you enough, and if you do these changes mid marking period, it will not in any way, shape, or form impact what is already in your gradebook. That was one of my biggest concerns too, but it will change nothing about your gradebook. It will only give you those added options. So reach out to somebody if you have questions.